The plane jolted violently, a sudden lurch that sent coffee cups flying and hearts racing. Passengers gripped armrests, whispering reassurances they didn't feel. What had started as mild turbulence escalated into something unnatural. The cabin lights flickered, alarms chimed faintly, and an eerie vibration hummed through the metal frame. Flight attendants attempted calm, moving quickly through the aisles, their smiles taut and unconvincing. Outside, storm clouds churned, but something felt off, something deeper than weather. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, reassuring yet strained, hinting at minor technical issues. Few noticed the subtle clicks and groans from the cockpit, noises the black box would later reveal as deathly signals of mechanical failure. Passengers prayed, clutched loved ones, and tried to ignore the dread building in their chests. Then, a violent shudder, unlike any turbulence, rattled the plane, and the cabin fell into a terrifying, surreal silence. What could shake a plane this violently? And what was truly happening above the clouds? The cabin plunged into darkness. Panic erupted as emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows on terrified faces. The hum of the engines was uneven now, a strange staccato that set teeth on edge. Passengers scrambled to find their seatbelts and loved ones, whispers of prayer mixing with gasps. Flight attendants struggled to maintain order, their voices barely audible over the groaning fuselage. The intercom crackled with an anxious pilot's voice, warning of technical difficulties, but the words barely penetrated the rising chaos. Outside, lightning illuminated the storm, revealing ominous, swirling clouds that seemed to press against the plane. Something was wrong, horribly wrong. The black box would later replay the final calm before the horror erupted, a moment frozen between disbelief and sheer terror. The plane pitched sharply to one side. Oxygen masks dropped with sudden weight, swinging like pendulums in the cabin. Passengers yanked them down, some gagging from fear, some from sudden turbulence. The deafening alarms made communication impossible. A mother clutched her child, rocking gently in the chaos, while others screamed in helpless frustration. Somewhere ahead, a metallic screech reverberated, not the storm, but the plane itself, bending and straining in ways that should have been impossible. Flight attendants shouted instructions over the noise, their words swallowed by the groaning frame of the aircraft. The black box would later reveal the panic in the pilots' voices, disbelief, confusion, and the horrifying recognition that this was no ordinary turbulence. A loud, unnatural thud shook the fuselage. Luggage fell from overhead compartments, striking the floor and passengers alike. The plane shuddered, twisting unnaturally against the storm's fury. Outside, the sky was a roiling black mass, pierced by sharp flashes of lightning that briefly revealed the terrified faces pressed against windows. The intercom crackled with repeated warnings, now almost incoherent. Some passengers tried to remain calm, gripping armrests, praying silently. Others screamed, tears streaming, realizing the gravity of their situation. The crew fought to maintain composure, moving from row to row, securing straps, and attempting to soothe the impossible. The black box would later capture every sound. Groans of metal, indistinguishable screams, whispered prayers. A record of absolute terror. Then silence. A terrifying, unnatural silence. The engines ceased their thrum, replaced by a hollow vibration that ran through the cabin. Panic gave way to frozen disbelief. Passengers clung to each other, eyes wide, sensing the unthinkable. Outside, the storm continued its violent dance, but the plane seemed eerily suspended, caught between survival and calamity. Flight attendants crouched in the aisles, whispering instructions that no one could hear over the pounding hearts. The black box would later reveal what the passengers could not yet comprehend. This was only the beginning. Something catastrophic had occurred, something beyond human anticipation. The question that would haunt everyone: could they survive what was coming next? The cockpit was tense. Alarms screamed as instruments flickered between numbers that made no sense. The pilots' voices cracked with stress, trying to diagnose the issue while keeping the plane level. Every jolt from the storm outside felt amplified inside the fragile fuselage. Passengers below gripped armrests, some praying silently, others shouting for reassurance they could not hear. The black box would later capture the subtle, almost imperceptible clicks in the system, a precursor to catastrophe. Crew members moved quickly, trying to maintain calm, but the unease was contagious. Each passing second felt stretched, a cruel reminder that this flight might not end in safety. The passengers were no longer whispering prayers. Fear had erupted into frantic cries. A family clutched each other tightly. Mother, 34, father, 37, and a child. 7. Their eyes wide as the plane pitched violently. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, their calm professionalism cracking under the strain. The hum of the engines was irregular, each vibration carrying a hidden threat. The black box recordings would later reveal subtle, urgent instructions, and the pilot's desperate coordination with air traffic control. Outside, lightning flashed against dark clouds, illuminating terrified faces for brief, blinding moments. Sudden alarms blared as the plane listed sharply. Passengers collided with seatbacks, bags tumbling to the floor. Flight attendants scrambled to stabilize the cabin. The pilots' voices became tense shouts over the crackling intercom. Some passengers began sobbing openly. Others stared blankly, paralyzed by the unreal nature of the disaster. The black box captured every sound. Frantic breathing, metallic groans, and a low, ominous vibration from the failing engines. Every passing second was a battle between survival instinct and panic. The intercom crackled again, barely audible over the alarms and shouts. The pilots fought to stabilize the aircraft, their hands flying across controls. Outside, the storm roared like a living thing, slashing rain and lightning against the fuselage. Passengers pressed their faces to windows, seeing only a churning void. The black box would later reveal subtle anomalies. Clicks, whirs, and alarm patterns that hinted at catastrophic failure. Signals the human ear could not yet interpret. Every motion in the cabin felt like a countdown, a warning that survival was slipping through their fingers. Then a sudden jolt. The plane dipped violently, and a deafening metallic screech filled the cabin. Screams erupted in unison, mingled with the creaking of stressed metal. Passengers clung to their seats, some sobbing, some staring into the void outside. Flight attendants braced themselves, whispering urgent instructions. The pilots shouted over the intercom, but even their voices seemed swallowed by the storm. The black box would later reveal that the metallic screech was the moment the aircraft began its irreversible mechanical failure. Every passenger felt it in their bones. Survival was no longer guaranteed. Could anyone survive the next few minutes? The black box hummed with eerie clarity, capturing every detail the human ear had missed. Pilots' voices trembled as they realized the instruments were failing in ways they had never trained for. A low, mechanical groan ran beneath the alarms, growing steadily louder. Passengers clung to seats, some silently praying, others whispering desperate farewells. The storm outside seemed almost secondary now. The true terror was inside the aircraft, in the systems that should have kept them safe. The black box recorded subtle clicks, hiss-like warnings, and a sequence of errors that would later baffle investigators. Every second stretched into eternity, and the feeling of doom was palpable. A passenger, 29-year-old female, gripped the seat in front, whispering, "This can't be happening." Around her, the cabin was a mix of frozen disbelief and frantic panic. Oxygen masks swung. Flight attendants, 31-year-old male and 28-year-old female, moved methodically, speaking calm words that few could hear. The black box captured the subtle, almost musical clicks of a failing hydraulic system, tiny warnings no one could interpret in real time. Every noise felt alive, every vibration a heartbeat of impending catastrophe. Passengers realized the turbulence was only a symptom of a far Worse problem, the plane shuddered violently as a loud metallic screech echoed through the fuselage. A 42-year-old male passenger held his daughter, 9, tightly, whispering reassurances he didn't believe himself. The black box later captured the sound of metal twisting, alarms overlapping in a horrifying symphony. The pilots' voices became frantic, their words clipped and urgent, issuing instructions to systems that no longer obeyed. Passengers' fear crystallized into terror. Some screamed, others froze, but all felt the creeping certainty. This was not turbulence, and survival was no longer a guarantee. The intercom crackled, distorted by static. Pilots attempted to relay their position to air traffic control, but the words barely reached the tower. Cabin lights flickered, shadows dancing over anxious faces. A mother, 37, held her infant close, murmuring soothing words she barely believed. The black box captured the faint, horrifying hum of failing systems, noises impossible to understand without hindsight. Every second in the cabin stretched painfully, each vibration a reminder that the aircraft had become unpredictable, alive with mechanical terror. Then a sound that made every passenger's blood run cold. A high-pitched metallic wail from the plane's structure. Panic reached a peak. Flight attendants, 32-year-old male and 30-year-old female, tried to move down the aisle, but momentum and fear made controlled movement impossible. The black box would later reveal the pilot's voice, cracking, issuing a command that came too late. Outside, the storm seemed insignificant compared to the mechanical chaos inside. Every passenger realized the plane was no longer under human control. Could anyone survive what the black box had just recorded? The plane's violent shuddering refused to relent. Oxygen masks hung like pendulums, swaying as passengers yanked them down in desperation. Alarms shrieked, echoing against the metal frame. A father, 37, clutched his 10-year-old son, whispering words of comfort he could barely believe. Flight attendants, 30-year-old female and 32-year-old male, moved frantically, urging calm. But chaos had taken over. The engines emitted unnatural groans, each pitch higher than the last. The black box recorded it all. Every scream, every creak, every desperate breath. A sonic map of fear and impending disaster. Metal groaned and twisted, overhead bins bursting open, sending belongings crashing to the floor. Passengers screamed, shielding themselves as best they could. A 28-year-old female clutched a briefcase to her chest, eyes wide in terror. Flight attendants shouted instructions, moving desperately between rows. The black box recorded every metallic shriek, every panicked whisper. It would later reveal subtle anomalies in engine pitch and control responses that no human could have corrected. Outside, the storm raged, but inside the cabin, fear had become a tangible, suffocating force. A deafening metallic screech filled the cabin. Passengers collided with seatbacks and each other. A mother, 36, pressed her 8-year-old daughter close, rocking back and forth in desperation. Flight attendants moved rapidly, some barely holding onto their balance, shouting instructions that were swallowed by screams. The black box recorded every sound. The unnatural groan of stressed metal, the panicked commands from the cockpit, and the chilling realization that the aircraft was failing faster than anyone could react. The plane lurched violently to the left, knocking passengers sideways. A 65-year-old male and 62-year-old female struggled to keep their balance, clinging to nearby armrests. Oxygen masks swung, alarm bells screamed, and the cabin seemed to shrink with every jolt. Flight attendants moved with impossible speed, securing passengers where they could. The black box would later reveal the pilot's desperate, fragmented commands, punctuated by groans of machinery and cries from every corner of the cabin. The storm outside was relentless, but the real terror was inside, where human control had failed entirely. Then, a horrifying silence fell for a brief moment, an unnatural pause in the chaos. Passengers froze mid-scream, eyes wide. Outside, the storm continued, but the plane itself seemed to shudder with something darker than the wind. Flight attendants crouched, whispering reassurances that no one could hear. The black box would later capture the moment the pilots realized the aircraft's controls were failing entirely. A moment of pure, unfiltered horror. The question lingered over every trembling passenger. Would anyone survive this descent into chaos? The pilots struggled to regain control. Instruments flickered violently, showing conflicting altitudes and airspeeds. The storm outside pummeled the fuselage, rain slashing against windows, lightning illuminating the twisted metal frame. Passengers clutched each other, some screaming, some silent with dread. A father, 39, held his 11-year-old son, murmuring words of comfort that were swallowed by the roar of chaos. Flight attendants, 32-year-old female and 31-year-old male, moved between rows, urging calm that no one could hear. The black box recorded it all. Every command, every groan of metal, every terrified gasp. A sonic record of unrelenting fear. A violent jolt sent passengers crashing into seats and trays. A mother, 35, pressed her 7-year-old daughter against her chest, whispering desperately. Oxygen masks swayed wildly, alarms blared, and the plane's frame creaked under impossible stress. Flight attendants, 30-year-old male and 29-year-old female, moved frantically down the aisles, trying to stabilize passengers. The black box captured every metallic screech, every panicked cry, and every urgent command from the cockpit. Survival felt increasingly uncertain. Communication with air traffic control became fragmented, distorted by static and interference. The pilots shouted their positions and emergency status, but answers came slowly, if at all. Outside, lightning illuminated the storm, reflecting in terrified faces pressed against windows. The black box captured every distorted transmission, every frantic repetition, every breathless pause. Passengers' fear became palpable, a living thing moving through the cabin. The plane shuddered again, and every person on board understood. Landing safely might be impossible. The plane lurched violently as the pilots attempted a last-minute maneuver to stabilize the descent. A 68-year-old male and 65-year-old female grasped armrests, bracing against sudden movements. Oxygen masks swung. Alarms screamed and luggage fell from overhead bins. Flight attendants moved as best they could, shouting instructions swallowed by chaos. The black box captured everything. Groaning metal, distorted intercom messages, cries of terror, and the pilots' frantic attempts to save lives. Every second was a countdown toward disaster, a record of helplessness against the storm and failing machinery. Then silence. Terrifying, unnatural silence. For a brief moment. The plane hovered mid-air, trembling, caught between survival and calamity. Outside, the storm continued its violent dance, but inside, every passenger sensed what the black box would later confirm. Mechanical failure had reached its peak, control was gone, and the end was inevitable. Flight attendants crouched, whispering reassurances no one could hear. The pilots' final commands echoed faintly, fragmented, over the intercom. Could anyone survive the moment the black box would later record as the last? Investigators huddled around the black box, the hum of its mechanisms now a grim storyteller. Every playback revealed details passengers could never have imagined. Subtle clicks, mechanical groans, and faint, distorted voices. One investigator, 45-year-old male, traced a sequence of instrument failures on a tablet, each anomaly a warning ignored or unnoticed. Another 38-year-old female played back the cockpit audio repeatedly, each iteration revealing a growing terror as pilots realized control was slipping. The recordings painted a vivid, horrifying picture. This disaster was not merely weather. It was a chain reaction of mechanical failures, human error, and catastrophic design flaws. The team listened closely to cockpit recordings. A 42-year-old male investigator noted the subtle change in engine pitch at exactly 14 minutes into the flight. Another 41-year-old female highlighted sequences where the pilots issued repeated commands that were never executed by the aircraft. Every groan of metal, every beep of a warning light now had a story. A series of escalating malfunctions no human could correct in time. The black box had captured a record of near-perfect human effort colliding with relentless mechanical failure. A tragedy written in sound and motion. The black box also revealed the passenger's perspective in audio detail. Muffled screams, whispered prayers, and frantic instructions from flight attendants. A 34-year-old male investigator remarked on the clarity of panic captured. It was chillingly human, a testament to the terror experienced. Investigators pieced together every row of seats, every action, every moment of life and fear, as if replaying the disaster in real time. What seemed like chaos in the cabin was a horrifyingly precise record of survival instinct meeting unstoppable mechanical failure. As playback continued, investigators uncovered the final, chilling anomaly. A subtle click that had triggered a cascade of failures leading to the catastrophic loss of control. A 50-year-old male lead investigator shook his head, noting that no crew could have prevented it. The mechanical chain reaction was inevitable once initiated. The black box revealed the unimaginable. The disaster was encoded in the aircraft itself, a ticking time bomb of design flaws and systemic oversights. Each playback added another layer of horror, painting a narrative that no one could have imagined in real time. The black box playback ended. Silence filled the room. Investigators stared at the monitors, faces pale, absorbing the full scope of what they had just witnessed. A perfect storm of human effort, mechanical failure, and tragic inevitability. The recordings told the story better than any written report ever could. The horror was complete, and the truth undeniable. The question remained, could such a disaster ever happen again if the lessons were not learned? The aftermath was surreal. Wreckage investigators sifted through revealed fragments of what had been a fully functioning plane moments earlier. Survivors' testimonies were fragmented, scattered like the debris around them. Every word, every trembling recollection matched the black box recordings. A 46-year-old male investigator noted the human resilience amid horror, the instinct to survive even in the face of impossible odds. The recordings had told the truth, but the survivors' experiences added layers of emotion that no machine could capture. The full weight of the disaster settled over the team like a suffocating storm. News crews arrived, capturing images of survivors wrapped in blankets, faces pale and haunted. A 35-year-old female passenger recounted moments frozen in time. The metallic groan of the fuselage, the oxygen mask swinging, the flash of lightning illuminating terror. Her words echoed what the black box had recorded, a chilling confirmation of the mechanical failure and human desperation. Every survivor carried a fragment of the story, a living testament to both horror and endurance. Investigators reconstructed the chain of events with meticulous precision. A 50-year-old male lead investigator and 43-year-old female colleague mapped every failure, every groan of stressed metal, every scream captured by the black box. The sequence of mechanical and human errors formed a haunting narrative, a disaster that was as much inevitable as it was preventable. Every revelation brought a deeper understanding and a greater horror of how fragile human control truly is at 35,000 feet. The aviation community responded with scrutiny and urgency. Regulatory agencies examined the design flaws and procedural oversights that had made the disaster inevitable. A 47-year-old male engineer demonstrated on monitors how a sequence of minor failures cascaded into catastrophic loss of control. The black box had preserved the final moments, but the investigators' work transformed the recordings into lessons. Safety protocols were rewritten, procedures re-examined, but the emotional scars of passengers and crew lingered, a reminder that prevention must always match technology. Finally, silence returned, but the questions remained. The black box lay quiet, its secrets decoded, the truth revealed. Survivors began to heal, but every memory, Every whisper of panic remained etched into their minds. Investigators closed the files, knowing the world had witnessed both horror and resilience. The story ended with a chilling thought. Technology can fail. Humans can panic. But the lessons endure. And the black box will always bear witness. Who survives when the machine they trust becomes the architect of terror?